As it seems at the moment, I will bring you one German Politics Explained video in a few weeks from a very special location with a very special guest. As a preparation for this, I'm gonna talk about federalism today. But first, if you haven't done so yet, please subscribe to my channel so you won't miss another German Politics Explained video. But now, let's get started. Hey there, I'm Mark, and I welcome you back to my channel, and I welcome you to another episode of German Politics Explained. Today I'm going to talk about federalism. You heard about this in my first German Politics Explained video already, when I introduced you to the 16 German states. Today I have to go a little bit more into depth about that principle and to give you a little bit more information so you will understand my surprise video that's coming in a few weeks. So let's just get into the topic. German federalism. Federalism is the state organizing principle of the Federal Republic of Germany. In 1949, it was constitutionally anchored in the Grundgesetz, that is our constitution. The hallmark of the German federal system is the close cooperation between the federal government and the states. The latter participate in the legislation through the Federal Council, participate in EU affairs and implement federal laws on their administrations. In recent decades, the federal system has been redesigned in several reform steps. The discussion was and is often the design of the state financial equalization between the states. By 2019, a reform of financial federalism seems inevitable. Cooperative federalism. German federalism is based on cooperation between the federal and state levels. The countermodel is the competitive federalism. After 1949, more and more powers were transferred to the federal government, which in turn allowed the federal states to have a larger say in the Federal Council, especially since, according to Article 84 of the Constitution, it would have a say anyway if the federal government intervenes in the administrative structure of the federal states to legislate. However, the financial constitution is still the main problem, making poorer countries or states de facto borders of the federal government. In addition, there was an increasing interconnectedness of competences, making it difficult to make quick decisions. There is a risk that the different horizontal levels will paralyze each other. There is also a danger that laws will be passed at the federal level and that the states and local authorities will have to pay them, especially since federal legislation has left little room for maneuver. One possible solution to the latter problem is the principle of connection. The sphere of influence of state policy is also hampered by extensive cooperation between the states. Above all, this is due to the preservation of legal unity and the securing of a mobility within the federal territory, but in particular reduces the sphere of influence of the state parliaments. An example of the interlocking of the states with each other is also the Conference of Ministers of Education, which should ensure that as uniform criteria as possible are applied in the education system of the individual states. Part of the critics say that this creates an egalitarianism that dissolves the great advantage of educational federalism, namely the competition of states for the best system, into a lazy compromise. Others are of the opinion that the school system have already diverged so far that the problems of relocation and recognition of diplomas are a real disadvantage for Germany, even though it is often said that it is precisely the competition of federalism, as in the cultural and economic sphere, which offers the possibility to arrive at a better solution. Executive federalism. Characteristic of German federalism is its special form of application as so-called executive federalism. By definition, the term executive federalism refers to a political system in which there is a close interlocking of the executive at the federal level and state level. At the same time, relative powerlessness of the state parliaments. In other systems with two legislative bodies, such as the United States of America, the representatives of a federal state, the senators, are specially appointed by elections in the state. But they have, in contrast to the German model, neither executive nor legislative function in the state. Their task is exclusively representation at the federal level. The executive function in a member state is assumed by governors, who in turn have no functions at the federal level. The peculiarity of German federalism is that the Federal Council consists of representatives of the state governments. This system is unique in the world and is difficult to compare. Similarity exists with the system of the European Union, in which the governments of the member states are represented in the Council. This Council of Ministers is part of the legislative process alongside the European Parliament. Federalism in the Constitution. The Constitution for the Federal Republic of Germany defines federalism as a political organizational form. Even the preamble expresses that the Federal Republic consists of several states. I quote, "The Germans in the countries of Baden-Württemberg, Bavaria, Berlin, Brandenburg, Bremen, Hamburg, Hesse, Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, Lower Saxony, Nordrhein-Westphalia, Rheinland-Palatinate, Saarland, Saxony, Saxony-Anhalt, Schleswig-Holstein, and Thuringia have completed the unity and freedom of Germany and free self-determination." In Article 20 of the Constitution, the Federal Republic of Germany is expressly constituted as a federal state. The principle is protected by the eternity clause of Article 79 in the Constitution, which declares it to be irrevocable. Also, no constitution changing two-thirds majority of the German Bundestag, which is the federal parliament, and the Bundesrat, the federal council, may cancel the federal structure and organization of the Federal Republic. The only way to dissolve the federal structure of the Federal Republic would be to adopt a new constitution under Article 146 of the Constitution. Article 30 emphasizes the sovereignty of the states. The outflow of this sovereignty is in particular the cultural sovereignty, the core of statehood of the states. Federal participation in federal legislation and in EU matters is formulated in Articles 23 and 50 and is made more concrete by the act of cooperation between the Federation and the states in the EU affairs. The division of responsibilities between the federal government and the states is dealt with in Articles 70 to 74 of the Constitution. The assignment of state administrative tasks is governed by the Articles 83 to 87 of the Constitution. Subsequently, the financial sovereignty and the distribution of tax revenue between the federal government and the states are constituted. According to Articles 115a to 115l of the Constitution, the legal situation for the interaction between the Federation, so the federal government, and the state changes substantially as a result of a case of defense, or in case of defense. In particular, under Article 115e, under certain conditions, the Joint Committee may claim the right of the Bundestag and the Bundesrat, so the Federal Parliament and the Federal Council. According to Article 115f, the federal government may issue the necessary instructions to the state governments, in urgent cases also to the state authorities. Federal bodies and structures. Constitutional amendments to the law require the approval of two-thirds of the votes of the Federal Council. If these are not achieved, no change in the Constitution is possible. The Federal Council has an absolute veto. Legislative decrees that may affect country finances are one of these topics. Another one is topics that touch their autonomy, topics that concern the tasks of the community, or topics that have to do with governing the reorganization of the federal states or similar, and topics that require the approval of the absolute majority of votes, or these are topics that require the approval of the absolute majority of votes. The Federal Council must approve these parliamentary decisions. If it refuses the consent, no law can come about. The Federal Council has an absolute veto. As currently about 60% of the federal laws are subject to approval, the Federal Council has a strong position in the legislative process. Simple or objection laws. In other decisions of the law, the so-called simple or objection laws, the Federal Council may appeal by an absolute majority, which however can be rejected by the Bundestag by an absolute majority as well. If the Federal Council objects by a 2/3 majority, the Bundestag can only reject it with a 2/3 majority. If the refusal does not take place, no law can come about. The Federal Council therefore has a suspensive veto. Advantages of the federal system of the Federal Republic of Germany. First of all, distribution of power. That means no one can gather too much power. Political integration and proximity to citizens. Subsidiarity. Protection and integration of minorities. Enrichment and preservation of the local culture. Competition among the federal states. And of course, human resources and fruitful experiments. But there are also deficiencies of the federal system of the Federal Republic of Germany. First of all, arbitrariness of national borders, blockade and slowing of political decisions. That is a point we had several times in the 90s, for example. Political preponderance of small states, disinterest continued in population groups at the state politics, enduring campaigning, because in a federal state you have many more important elections because there are always also state elections. Many administrative apparatuses and associated high expenses. Economic imbalances and fiscal equalization. Of course, economically non-viable states. We do have city-states, as you could learn in one of my videos. Unsatisfactory minimum consensus in the Conference of Ministers of Culture. And locational disadvantages. Reforms. All parties agree that there is an urgent need for reform. For this reason, a reform commission was chaired by Edmund Stoiber and Franz Müntefering. They are both very learned politicians. One was Prime Minister of Bavaria, and the other one was the former leader of the Social Democrats. The aim of the reform was a clarification of powers. The number of laws required that requires consent of the Federal Council should also be reduced. The reform process, however, seems difficult as it involves the skills of many local and ministerial authorities. Repeatedly, the work of the Reform Commission was considered too timid, and in December 2004, negotiations failed. In February 2006, as a consequence of the Grand Coalition, negotiations could be successfully concluded and brought into Parliament some federalism reform laws. But from a personal point of view, they definitely did not go far enough. There's still a lot of work to do. Restructuring of the states and restructuring of the federal territory. For these topics, since the beginning of the Federal Republic, has been repeatedly asked to merge smaller countries. That has especially to do with the deficiencies of a federalism. In December 2003, for example, the Brandenburg Prime Minister Matthias Platzek called for the merger of Berlin, Brandenburg and Mecklenburg-Vorpommern. Again and again, the mergers of Bremen and Lower Saxony, Schleswig-Holstein, Mecklenburg-Vorpommern and Hamburg, and occasionally also all 5 North German states are required to be a northern state. Similarly, the merger of Saxony, Saxony-Anhalt and Thuringia, and the unification of the Saarland with Rhineland-Palatinate is requested. In October 2014, the then Saarland's Prime Minister Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer, by the way now Secretary of Defense and the leader of the Conservative Party in Germany, suggested the discussion about mergers of individual federal states. It demanded a radical reorganization of the Federal Republic if the reform of the financial equalization does not relieve the burden on the poor states. I quote, "We would then have to talk about how we set ourselves in Germany as a whole future-proof, specifically where there will be only 6 or 8 states in the future instead of the previous 16 states. Such mergers, however, require a referendum pursuant to Article 29 of the Constitution and encounter resistance. in particular due to historically grown traditions. So, that's all I wanted to tell you about federalism today. I hope it was informative for you and you enjoyed watching my video. For now, I just want to thank you for watching. Have a nice day and see you soon.